What's up, plant lovers? I'm Devin Wallien. Welcome to Plant Vibrations. I'm here in Westchester, Pennsylvania. It's the first week of spring. You can see there's not much going on behind me yet. I'm already thinking about how I want to decorate my deck with plants this summer. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this video, how to create a lovely container garden on your decks, patios, porches, balconies, what have you. We're going to be going into some more of the stylistic ideas to think about if you want to create a true, lovely garden atmosphere wherever you might be. So the first thing that you want to think about is how you actually want to use your space. What sorts of plants do you want to actually be growing? Do you want to have an edible garden on your deck? Do you want a cut flower garden on your deck? Do you want to have structural plants that create beautiful scenery on your deck? Maybe not so much flowers, but robust, beautiful tropical foliage. Or is it some sort of combination of one or two or three of them combined? And you also want to think about the actual energy that you're trying to create. Do you want to have an overflowing abundance? Do you want to have a bit of a more modernistic, restrained beauty? Do you want to have just a couple strategically placed plants to fill voids on your patio or deck? When you're thinking about that sort of energy that you want to create with the plant life, with the quantity of plant life, you always want to remember the importance of negative space, which is leaving areas empty, because negative space is what's really going to balance out the plants with the natural scenery around you. Whether you're, on a spot like I am, or if you're in the middle of the city, unless your goal is really to be secluded from the world, you're going to want to have some sort of connection with your surroundings, and that is best achieved through some elements of negative space. For me here on my deck, I have windows that I can absolutely look into my home, but more importantly, if I'm inside, I'm looking out. Also, my deck has a lot of blank walls that I definitely want to fill with foliage, fill with plant material. It's quite tall. How do I start sourcing plant material that's going to fill out all of these blank areas, while at the same time leaving open views and vistas that I definitely don't want to block? I would never want to block that view, so I'm never going to have plants along that railing that are going to seclude my eyes from the beauty that happens in that garden during the course of the summertime. Likewise, the forest garden behind me, I absolutely want to enjoy that, so I'm not going to put a bunch of heavy, bulky plant material along this railing either, because I don't want to block those views either. But on the flip side, maybe behind your deck is a neighbor that you don't really love. So maybe you want as much bulky plant material as you possibly can get your hands on. Now, as you start making these plans, you don't want to forget about some of the essentials. Maybe you need to bring your seating out of coverage from the shed, putting it back onto your deck. You don't want to have so many plants that you can't really maneuver about your outdoor space. If you want to do yoga, have some space to do yoga or to lay out, you need to really think about that, and you'll recognize if, I've definitely had too many plants on my deck before, and it becomes cumbersome to enjoy some of the activities I like to do on my deck, or more importantly, that my wife enjoys doing on the deck. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, there's nothing quite like repetition in a garden, whether that's in the garden beds or in your container. But at the same time, you gotta have some variety. You need to grow some plants that are upright. You need to grow some plants that are kind of outstretching. You need to grow some overflowing plants too. Put a little bit of artistry into the plants that you're selecting. Think about how you can include a variety of different shapes of the growth habit, but also different shapes of plant foliage, which, as we all know, foliage is 10 times more important than flowers, which are absolutely fleeting. Even with our annuals, the foliage is going to be an important element. Now, we don't need to grow a bunch of new plants every single year. We definitely can be and should be thinking about how we're going to incorporate some of the house plants that we grow indoors into our outdoor scheme. Now remember, if you are looking to find how to appropriately bring your houseplants outside, check the video link in the description below for how to safely bring your houseplants out so that they don't get burned. Now, it's also a good time to talk about growing perennials on our decks and patios because, of course, we love to have containers filled with perennials that aren't going to die and that we can actually keep from one season to the next. And it can be a little bit tricky. You know, I'm growing here in Zone 6B in Westchester, and the general rule of thumb is that if you're growing a perennial in a container outside, the containers aren't going to protect those root systems anywhere nearly as much as the actual ground will. So if I'm growing in Zone 6B or 7A, I should go 2 zones colder for hardiness. So that means a plant that is hardy to zones 5A, that should be safe in a container on my deck throughout the winter time. And it's always really important to bring those containers as close to our home as possible, because a little bit of that extra close proximity to those home walls, it's going to block it from wind, it's going to keep those root systems a little bit warmer, and it is absolutely essential to be watering our plants throughout the winter if we're not getting regular precipitation. I love growing things like hydrangeas, other sort of shrubby plants, even conifers in containers from one year to the next. I typically won't grow herbaceous perennials that die back all the way. If I'm going to grow a perennial in a container, it should have some woody structure to it that's going to create a little bit of interest even throughout the winter time. Now, going back to that idea of repetition, it's one of the best ways to create a unity and a harmony in any garden setting. And repetition can come in many ways. You can repeat a similar color. Maybe it's different shades of yellows and oranges. Maybe it's repeating similar foliage styles like a banana and a canna. Maybe it is repeating or matching the foliage color of one plant with the flower colors of another plant. Maybe a dark foliage plant with a dark flowering plant. These ways to create that repetition are going to create a more harmonized feel in your garden, and it's going to make your container garden actually look like you put effort into it, like you actually had an idea and a plan. And it's so much more satisfying to have that than just a mishmash of whatever you find at the box store. So maybe you do just want a bunch of colorful plants, colorful flowers. One way that you can create that harmony amongst those sort of plants is by having a theme with your containers. You know, here on my deck we have like the mahogany or brown with the black railing. So I've chosen for containers that are either a terracotta or a black. And that way all my containers kind of match in their tones or in their shapes. And that is also a great way to create that garden feel. Maybe your vibe is whiskey barrels and trough planters. Whatever might suit you where you live and what your energy is. Let your energy shine. Now, one of the best things that you can think about doing is how you can create varieties of heights, whether that is just through the shapes of your plants, but also putting containers on top of things to create that height, different heights throughout your patio or deck space. It's really important for creating that flowing energy, but it's also essential to protect your decks. The worst thing that you can do is put a bunch of containers right on your deck. That's going to ruin your deck over time because moisture can't escape from underneath those containers. But having a bunch of pots, particularly a bunch of small pots on your deck, creates a very cluttered feel, and that's what we're trying to avoid. I've sourced pretty much everything on my deck either from Facebook Marketplace, from secondhand places, Goodwill, antique stores, and a couple things from Amazon for sure, but the majority of it is just things that I've found and that I've just, you know, it's part of the hunt of creating your deck garden is that fun. Do it over a few years, who cares? You don't have to do it all at once. But for those plants that you are gonna put directly on your deck or patio, use pot feet. They're just these little things that you put underneath your containers that elevates your pots just about 1/2 of an inch, and that's gonna allow the moisture to flow out from underneath your container, and that's going to protect your decks. And one more thing, it's very important to have at least a couple large pots on your patio container garden, because that is what's going to create that more full feel. Like I was saying, a bunch of small containers ends up feeling cluttered. I love to look for large containers at TJ Maxx, Marshalls, places like those. They always have tons of large containers at pretty good deals. And what I like to do, I'll put those large pots on wheels, and that is gonna, number one, act like a pot, like pot feet, but also if I wanna move it around, I can do so easily, and I will put them on the wheels before I plant into them so that once I get soil in there, it's gonna be really heavy. I'm not gonna be wanting to move that around. And the final thing that you really need to think about before you get planting is your access to water. Do you have a hose readily available? Are you going to be filling up your watering pail in your kitchen sink in order to water your plants? The availability of water should absolutely dictate the type of plants that you're going to be growing. If you only have the kitchen sink, well, you should be thinking about really drought tolerant plants, plants like our succulents, plants like agapanthus that don't require daily watering. If you do have access to a hose and it's not a problem for you, all right, go ahead. Grow some things like cannas or sun pations that need to remain consistently moist all summer long or else they will fail. And the final thing is, think about, do you have any summer travel plans? And if so, for how long? And how will you keep your plants watered? One of the things that I always do with my container gardens is I put a layer of wood chips on the top of the soil, and that's gonna help to lock in moisture, and that's gonna allow the moisture to stay in the pot longer than if I didn't have it. That means I could probably go with some of my plants 5 or 6 days between watering and they will be fine. Maybe not in the height of summer, but you get the idea. So now that you have your thoughts jogging, things to think about, maybe for the first time, make a little sketch. Try to visualize a little bit what you want to achieve. Once you have some shapes, then you can do some more investigations online, what kinds of plants that you could plant to create those shapes, to fill those gaps, to make those areas look like what you want. But that's all I got for today. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like. If you have any other comments, things that I didn't think about, leave it in the comment section below. We have an awesome plant community here, tons of great gardeners, full of awesome wisdom. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll catch you guys later. Ciao.